I want to mostly give you a demo today and then have time for questions. I think it's fair to say the search space has gotten a lot more interesting in recent weeks. I had a lot of deja vu moments when in 2010, as a PhD student, I tried to bring neural networks into the field of natural language processing. At some very, very smart senior professors kind of say, Richard, you seem like a smart guy. Why do you want to waste your career on this thing of neural nets for NLP? They barely work for speech recognition, maybe some computer vision, because those are continuous signals, but don't waste your career on neural nets. And I was a little stubborn and thought, no, I really don't want to do feature engineering all my PhD and graduate student descent, and so decided to keep pushing for it. And to be honest, in 2020, when I started a search engine company, I had also a lot of very smart investors this time say, Richard, you have so much potential. Why do you want to work in search? That space is dead. Like, no one's going to be able to compete with Google. They have all the AI. They have all the distribution. No one cares about search. You can't make it any better than the list of blue links they already have. Look at all these other dead companies that tried to build a better index or something and failed. And again, I was a little stubborn. And just like with deep learning for NLP, I think more and more people are coming around now. It's not quite where neural nets for NLP is, which is basically now the complete field. But we've seen a couple of different waves last year where it became, I think if you're sort of attuned to the search space, became more and more obvious that there has been a big vibe shift in search. And at a very high level, it's kind of crazy to think that technology like natural language processing has gotten up and up and up. It's gotten better and better. We can do better sentiment classification, better question answering, better summarization, better translation, all of that. Yet the biggest application of NLP, which is search, has somehow gotten worse and worse over the last decade. So there's clearly some kind of crisis, and as a startup CEO, you have to keep repeating this to yourself. Every crisis is an opportunity. Every crisis is an opportunity. Otherwise, it'll be a little too stressful. And so I don't know if you have heard of this secret Google hack. Who here has heard of this secret Google hack to add Reddit to your queries at the end? See a couple hands. That was a sign, right? If people feel like, man, I have to add Reddit to the end of my Google queries in order to get what real people are saying, that means that there's some flaw. And before that blew up several times on Twitter, we already had a Reddit app on u.com that you could say, oh, I want to see this more often or almost all the time, or maybe never. And I don't like Reddit at all. Then last summer, you had a wave of folks, including New York Times, talking about how TikTok is replacing Google for Gen Z. And honestly, I guess I don't think I'm Gen Z. And so I thought, no way, like why and how? So I actually started to try it, beginner's mind. And for things like restaurants, I was actually quite surprised. But if you're looking for a restaurant, you actually get a lot of useful information if you see this kind of video. Like you see, oh, that's what that food looks like. Oh, this is like a fancier place. This food looks appealing, right? And so I was actually quite surprised. So before that all happened, we already had also a TikTok app, and I now like that in order to stay young and see how young people are looking at the world. Before I jump into the last big wave of search, which we're all aware of, is going to be ChatGPT, of course, I want to show you sort of as a developer, that was a big persona for us, what the experience used to be like when you're programming. And it's very important for a startup. This is sort of a standard startup mantra is focus on a tiny, tiny niche, dominate that niche, and then expand. Unfortunately, in search, that's really, really hard. Turns out developers are people too. They want to go out, they want to know the weather, they need driving directions, they trade stocks, they do all the things. So it's actually not as easy to just choose a tiny, tiny niche if your goal is to actually build a general purpose search engine. But what is clear is that the main developer experience could be so much better. And so this is kind of an intuitive example here of what I mean by this. If I'm a developer and I want to use the programming language Python to implement a Fibonacci function, this is my experience in Google. I get a bunch of blue links. Maybe people also ask. I kind of hope that I'm getting my Python code, but nothing really answers my question. So I'm going to have to open a bunch of different tabs, spend a few minutes surfing different sites, trying to find that code snippet. Now, last year, we implemented a bunch of different, we call them apps. And we actually, as a developer, you end up often on Stack Overflow. And instead of looking for the code snippet is right here. There's your copy and paste button, and you're done. So you just saved yourself 5 minutes. And if you can find it, then maybe an AI would also write the function for you. And that was our first foray into generative AI within search, is to have an AI write code for you if you can find it online. Now, of course, everything has changed because the future currently, and this is going to be a big theme of this talk, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Now, of course, everything is chat-based. So if I ask that question to our chat bot, I get a similar kind of function, and also the links of where that happened. But before I go into chat, which is going to be sort of what we're actually announcing a new version of today, I want to first talk a little bit about the apps. And why do I think apps are important, and what is even an app in the search context? The idea is that essentially Google is pushing very hard and has over the last decade so-called zero-click searches, where you don't actually have to leave the Google ecosystem anymore. You can go to, people also ask this and that, maybe you stay on Maps or shopping or YouTube or something, but the idea is you don't have to leave that first page. Now, zero clicks are very convenient for users. And as a consumer startup, you never want to fight convenience. Probably also as an enterprise startup, you never want to fight convenience. It will always win. It's a losing battle to fight that. But that also means that the entire rest of the internet kind of suffers. So how do you combine this idea of having zero-click searches with something that is more fair and equitable for everyone else except the search engine company? And that is the answer, we think, are apps. And so here are just a few apps and a little bit about our app ecosystem before I share with you what that means for a new chat-based search future. So YouWrite was one of our the second app that was in generative AI. It's basically if you search for how to write well or how to write an essay or Jasper, things like that, then this app may come up. And it will just write the essay for you. So, think of this as, in some ways, also pushing very much of what a search engine is actually supposed to do. In this case here, I asked for venture capital investing in artificial intelligence, and asked me to write a witty blog post, and that's what it will do. And what's interesting here is that when you think about it as a search engine, a lot of people used to think, well, it's mostly just to go somewhere else and click some blue link. But clearly, when you look for the weather, and that query, even Google can't monetize because they can't quite make you buy better weather. They would like to, I'm sure, but it's hard. They also have these little widgets or apps. But essentially, when you think about like a jobs to be done framework for a search engine, instead of just telling you how to do things, let's just have you finish the task, right? And become much more of an accomplishment engine. So this was one of those. And of course, it's actually a very popular app. It's also the first one where you can actually pay for a subscription within a search engine. It's kind of interesting, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. Then, of course, there are incredibly exciting things in generative AI for images. So if I want to draw a cute skydiving baby over mountains, boom. This one here is slightly more ethical because at least he's doing a tandem jump. This guy's a little bit more crazy doing it by himself. But yeah, I love this. I can play around with this for a long time. Here's a cute chatbot in the style of Gustav Klimt. But this is yet another one where we don't want you to just find things, but we want to help you accomplish the tasks that you set out to do when you ask the search engine, how to do it. Now, in order to make this a viable search engine, we actually had to build hundreds of apps. As I mentioned, even with the focus on developers want all kinds of things, different social media, different features, shopping, and so on. So we built news, of course. We built a ton of different apps. And then in December, we also opened up this app store to the rest of the world. So now anyone can actually contribute and build an app and start their funnel, and maybe even end and finish their funnel right on that first page. And that, to me, is just a really crucial bit for where the future of search can and should go. A lot of folks in SEO are freaking out because this will change SEO. Instead of you trying to manipulate some AI from Google to take your content in order to then start your funnel, you just have to build a really useful app. And if people actually like it and prefer to see it, they are in control. And that, to me, is also a really crucial bit for our entire information age as we move forward. You know, we think a lot about the kind of food we eat, but just as important for our happiness is the kind of information we consume and the information diet that we have. And I think it's very important to have some control and some agency over that. And so each of these apps, you know, some people love TikTok, some people hate TikTok, some people love Reddit, some people hate Reddit. And it's important to be able to have some control over the information diet rather than just have your query be sold to the highest bidding advertiser every time. And so here's an example of one of the first apps that was submitted. It's actually a really cool company and startup called Luria. They use large language models to summarize a bunch of different reviews from different sources, such as Reddit and Wirecutter and so on, and then help you and show you the single most helpful, like unbiased review or set of reviews for a different product. And you know, I actually find their recommendations very useful, so I like the app. I'll see it more often. And it's actually super easy to build such an app, and I encourage you all, if you have a business, especially if it's a developer related and you want to get to millions of developers that we now have as searchers on the platform, you can basically just define a relatively simple config file here and then build pretty neat apps, such as this What to Watch app. Even our internal team now uses this open platform to submit new apps. Now, I talked about apps, but of course, one of the biggest things on everybody's mind is ChatGPT and how that may become the Google killer. And I wish I could show you why it couldn't, but I can't get to it. But the main thing is if you asked ChatGPT who won the Soccer World Cup in 2022, it will just tell you, like, I don't know, my knowledge has ended in 2021. And if you're a search engine, being, you know, up to 2021 is not quite good enough. Like, a lot of even programming questions have changed in the last couple of years. So you want to have a chat model that has actually access to the internet and could do the searching for you and then summarize all of that content. And that is essentially what we had launched in December last year. We're the first ever search engine to incorporate generative AI and a chatbot within it. And so if you ask us, like, who won the Soccer World Cup 2022, it'll actually tell you with a citation and recent sources what that answer is, and then summarize it for you. That enabled us, it was pretty magical, you know, for a consumer startup. We're kind of growing already reasonably well, but once we launched UChat, we kind of have that proverbial hockey stick that's continuing. It's exhausting, but incredibly exhilarating and fun to just have millions more users in a very short time frame. And so we're you know, observing, as you know, very much at the forefront of this, what the problems are and what, you know, potential solutions might be. And I'm sure many of you have heard that unfortunately these models also sometimes hallucinate and just make up stuff, right? And when you think about it, it's a pretty hard problem to solve, because one user might say, how did aliens invade Berlin in 2030? And they want to jam, they want to write a short story. And so you want to help them get something on the page and talk about how aliens invaded Berlin in 2030. And another user might ask, like, how did aliens invade Berlin in 2020? And they're actually worried. They think aliens are real. They think they're among us, right? Maybe they're lizard people, who knows? Like, and now it also makes up a story. But in this moment, you should have been factual and say, no, there were no aliens in 2020 in Berlin. And it's very hard for the model to know which state of mind you're currently in. Are you trying to brainstorm, jam, write a new love letter to your wife that doesn't yet exist in the world? Or do you want to know if something existed in the past? And so we basically observed this, and it's kind of interesting. Some people absolutely love large language models in search because they actually help them be much, much more productive. And other people think they're terrible, they're unethical, they're unsafe, and so on. They try to jailbreak them and then say, see, like it said something bad. Very often, those bad things you could also find on Wikipedia, which is sort of my new litmus test of sort of the safety of these models. If you can find the same content in the discussion section on Wikipedia, it's probably fine for a search engine with a chat to also show you that kind of content. But there are a couple of areas, and many of them, where it would be really, really good if you didn't hallucinate a bunch of stuff. And I'll show you this kind of example here that I just did a few days ago, where we asked, what does CRM stand for? And here you see kind of the magic of large language models. It'll tell you, it's custom relationship management systems, how to be used, gives you nice citations, and lets you learn about things. Now, we call this feature I'm about to present to you here CAL, which is a bit of a pun of California. I love California. But it stands for Chat, Apps, and Links. And I showed you these apps before, but how are they connected to chat? I'll show you right now, which is, you ask, what does CM stand for? It gives you the answer. Then you can ask a follow-up question, what's the biggest such company? Of course, it knows it's Salesforce, my old employer. And then you might ask, what's their stock price, right? And now, most any LLM in the world will kind of make up a bunch of numbers, which is not ideal if you're asking for a stock price. And so we thought to ourselves, what's the best way for an AI to give you that answer? And as much as I love NLP, and I've worked in it almost my entire professional life in natural language processing, sometimes it's better to just show you a plot rather than a bunch of text. And that is the best answer for that question. It's just a stock ticker, and you can look at it, and you can look, understand, this week low, and different time frames, and all of that. That is the best answer for that question. And now what's exciting is that the language model has access to both the back-end data of all these apps that we've built, as well as being given the choice of whether it should display that data in this multimodal fashion. And what do we mean by multimodal? Different modalities are essentially text, code, graphs, tables, images, interactive elements, tables, and whatnot. And then you can still ask a follow-up question like, who's the CEO? And it will, again, stay within context of that topic. And if you did want to just kind of quickly navigate somewhere similar to your dad's old search engine, you'd still have the list of blue links on the side. And that, to me, that combination of chat, apps, and links is the future of search. It will capture the past kind of use cases of a search engine, but it'll also be so much more useful when it comes to summarizing and agglomerating data. And I'll show you a few more fun examples. There are more and more apps that we're bringing in. I can ask where to watch this movie if Beale Street Could Talk. A general LLM and ours, with access to the internet, will give you a few answers. But you can also see our What to Watch app, which actually will tell you it's free on Netflix. You pay $3.99 on Amazon Prime if you want to rent it, and so on, and actually have the factual, groundedness for this kind of question. And you can quickly watch the trailer on IMDb and all of that. And then, again, you can ask follow-up question, what are similar movies? Something I struggle with a lot. My wife, it's takes almost as long to choose a movie and it takes to watch it. So it's nice to say, we both love this movie. Let's just watch something similar to that. I can ask, who is this guy? And it'll talk a little bit about me. But one problem that a lot of these models have is they will make up links that don't exist. So instead, let's just have a LinkedIn app with the ground truth data and the correct links that actually exist. We have these magical things still, give me a 5-day itinerary for Stockholm, and I'll like talk about a bunch of cool things you could see, but then also say like, what do other people on Reddit say about a 5-day trip to Stockholm, and what are their recommendations? And again, you can have control over whether you want to see that or not. And I'll just give 2 more, and then we happy to answer questions. We, of course, have done a lot of research. Brian McCann, my co-founder and CTO. So if I ask, like, show me some Brian McCann papers in archive, it will talk about them a bunch, give you links, but also just show you the actual official archive link with the abstract and everything, and of course the link to go to that site. And maybe one last one, which I think is super fun because it merges a lot of different research areas of generative AI for text as well as images. I asked the model, can you generate an image with AI? And the chat will tell me, yep, that's possible. But the app will just let me do it. And then I can say, oh, cool, I want to see a cat in space. And boom, there's a new image, put that in my blog post, and ship it. And so that, I think, is the future of search. And it's already here, but not equally distributed, which is one of the reasons I'm here to tell you about it. And this is mostly a demo, but I think it shows you a lot when you think about even very large incumbents as a company. You can still do interesting things if you move quickly. We now have Bing and Google. They announced to at some point publicly available, make publicly available a subset of those features. Last week that we launched last year. Now we're already further ahead, and I think that's actually possible. And one of the amazing things about generative AI and sort of pre-training large models is they capture a lot of information about different tasks without supervised training data. So anyone can now, with very little supervision, update and train models and compete in some pretty tough spaces. So yeah. Happy to answer questions, and thanks for listening.